The sermon this morning comes with a text not just from 2 Timothy, but also from Matthew 7 through 11. I'd like to read these verses. You'll remember them. They're part of the Sermon on the Mount, and songs have been made about them. But here's the words. Jesus is speaking. Ask, and it will be given to you. Search, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and everyone who searches finds. And for everyone who knocks, the door will be opened. Is there anyone among you who, if your child asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if a child asks for a fish, will give him a snake? If you then, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good things to those who ask of him? As I begin this morning, I'll ask you to bear with me. I'll get to the two texts eventually, but first, a couple of things. You ever heard the term modernity? It's a descriptive name for something begun during the European Enlightenment of the 1700s. Hardly seems very modern when you think about it that way. But one of the goals of this new way of thinking was to turn everyone into an individual according to the definitions of modernity. An individual, according to that, was someone who thinks that he or she is answerable to no story other than the one which he or she has personally chosen. There you go. In an age when who you were was determined by birth, and even your name was descriptive of what your father did for a living, and what you would likely do as well, this was a fundamental change in society. But like so many changes, the pendulum swung way over, and we still feel the effects of it today. So the modern person sees him or herself with severed ties to any prior claims of tradition or family or community. The individual is determined not to be determined by tradition or family or community or tribe. Throw out the past. I will think for myself was the essence of the message. Now you probably know that earlier, and even today to an extent, people got their stories from their parents or their church or from the town in which they lived. This is especially true for rural communities, I've found. These back stories were a big part in our back part of what these people would become. But as Adam Smith noted, the modern world detached people from such parental or faith-centered determinism and enabled them to choose their own jobs, to become creators of their own lives. Freedom then began being defined as a choice. Now, this is life as we know it. And in essence, there's nothing wrong with that. But many, if not most people today in the Western world want to be people who have no story for their lives other than the story that they've chosen for themselves. In fact, today we say our humanity is dependent upon our ability to choose our story. We now convince ourselves that we are free of tradition, free from communities or attachments, all the while never admitting that modernity itself is a story, a tradition, and a narrow-minded one at that. Look around you, and you see today the loneliness, alienation, and fragmentation that plagues modern life, making us all strangers. And although we are less affected by this in the rural communities, still, it's real. You know, our present state of social distancing is beginning to show many what is missing in modern self-centered living, the unattached, unanchored living that so many do today. When my master story is that I have no other story than what I have personally chosen, there is little to relate me to you. The fact is, we are not free, not half as free as we claim to be, when we ignore any formative stories that fed into ours. And now only have left for ourselves the story of me that begins somewhere around our sophomoric years. We serve only ourselves, so then we become victims of whatever cultural whim comes upon us and captures our attention. Our world is only as big as the thing that we focus on or and what we allow to define us. Just a few weeks ago, we were to have a dedication of Bo Detweiler. Scotty's right in front of me. He didn't know I was going to be saying this, but for he and Megan, I know they were going to bring Bo to church. And I think of the children that I've seen over the last 40 years and consider how there will be one thing after another that will shape each one of these young lives. In a few years, it will not be baby Bo any longer, not just someone crawling or taking his first steps. He'll be running and playing, and rest assured, he'll be getting into mischief. Scotty, blame your grandparents on that. That's what you do. But over the years, he may well be defined by the things he learns to do. But none of these things truly defines him, or at least it should not. See, the greatest danger any of us face is to end up with an identity that is less than what we start with. You see, we are all children of God. That's the essence of what is said when a child is dedicated in the church. A newborn is brought here. And in the act of dedication, the parents are acknowledging that the child's identity goes beyond anything that he or she might do in life, anything that others might try and identify him or her as. And this brings me to the text for this morning. You knew I'd get to it eventually. Jesus says, "Ask and it will be given to you. Search and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened." Here's our heavenly parent telling us in essence, children, I have given you this gift of life. I care for you and I love you and I care what happens to you. On this Mother's Day, those of us who have been blessed with moms that have guided us and nurtured us physically and spiritually, begin to see God for who God is. Spiritually, we live in a society where many ask what the meaning of life is and search for their purpose in it. But they don't know where to knock in order to explore the questions and seek the answers. While culture would often shove the church to the outskirts of daily living, it is the church's calling to offer the nourishments of the living bread of Christ to all who have not yet tasted that the Lord indeed is good. It is the church's calling to open up for people the larger picture of who we are called to be, and of the value that we have as we care and nurture one for another. Yes, we're individuals, each and every one of us, and yet we are individuals within community. We are called to let folks know what God would give them. Would a parent give a stone to a child who asks for bread? Samuel Langhorne Clemens, you know as Mark Twain, as we usually call him, he wrote a novel, a travel book called The Innocents Abroad. He describes the Holy Lands and he gives descriptions of various cities in Europe. In one part, he tells of viewing the grand statue of the Duke of Richelieu, who founded the city of Odessa, and he watched over it with parental care, pouring all his money into its well-being. Clemens tells us years later, Richelieu died in Sebastopol in poverty and in neglect. After he died, the people of Odessa used their money to erect a grand monument to him. While seeing the statue, Clemens remembered and records the words of Robert Burns' mother. Robert Burns, you remember, was a poet in Scotland. When Agnes, his mother, saw a very stately monument that had been erected to her son, Robert, her son who also died penniless and sick, she said, "Ah, Robbie, ye asked me for bread. Ye asked them for bread, and they had gained ye a stain. You asked for bread, and they gave you a stone." The world is not so caring. We can see that in the ways so many today are suffering and being taken advantage of. We can see it in the eyes of the refugees and the children not valued. We can see it in a culture whose decisions inspire us to think of me, a selfish world that offers little in the way of encouragement to give of oneself to others, to care for one another. For as a loving parent would hardly give their child a stone if he asked for bread, neither would our loving Lord. We should realize the love expressed in Jesus helps us to see how much more, how much better are the gifts from God, and how much better we might be if we were to follow that example. We should grasp this easily. But there's another side to the idea. We know how God acts toward us, but how do we respond to God's generous heart? Do we lay flowery words one upon another and build a monument to God? Do we simply say thank you for material gifts that we quickly and protectively call our own? Do we pass by occasionally and wipe the pigeon poop off the statue we erect to God? Or do we live a life of giving gratitude, knowing that all that we have is a blessing to be shared to the glory of God? In times like we have today, living through a pandemic, while greed does indeed rear its ugly head, still much of humanity shows its best in the giving of bread, in the caring for one another. And this is the calling that Jesus wants for us, not just in these times, but for every day. For it does bring joy to the giver as well as the one given to. If indeed this is an age of increasing modernity, if indeed we live in a time when folks can only see the story that they are creating, a story of me, then more than ever the world needs to see the larger picture, the larger statement from us, from the Church of Jesus Christ. Where did we come from? We have the answer, and it defines us as children of the living God. Where are we going? How we live each day should give definition and clarity to our declaration of identity in Jesus Christ. In that children's message I offered today, I described how I taught little leaguers how to throw the ball by stepping toward the glove of the catcher. You get a push off the back leg, and you get direction from where we place the front foot. Well, today, we often give flowers to moms, recognize that we have gotten both a push and a direction for travel from one who loves and cares for us. Perhaps it isn't that far a stretch for us to see how the Church of Jesus Christ, which we often call the Bride of Christ, offers us similarly a push and a direction so that our lives might go where God knows it is best for them to end up. Remember that earlier passage? Timothy was a true leader in the faith. He had the story of faith, the fullness of traditions from his mother and his grandmothers. The full richness of all that came before him informed this young man that there was more to his story, more to his life, than the small understanding that he could become on his own. There are many great things about the modern world, but even as we individually embrace the present, even as we send our young people forward into a story all their own, let's remember from where we came from and who it is that holds the future. God holds our future. Amen. A benediction. May the Lord bless you with love, that you may know your worth. May the Lord bless you with grace, that you may know that you are forgiven. And may the Lord bless you with peace, that in all things you may be assured of hope and growth and promise. God bless you today, and a happy Mother's Day to all of you moms out there. Hope it's a wonderful day for you all. Amen.